Tea towels, anyone? This is a tea towel. Now, I gotta be honest, I didn't know exactly what a tea towel was. I just knew that it was some sort of a towel that Ringo Starr got from the canteen at Abbey Road and put over his snare drum and toms and stuff later in the Beatles' career. Got a very, very dead sound. And I gotta say, I came of age sort of with drums in the 80s. And I guess as a kid, I remember concert toms in the 70s, the disco era, and hearing a very dead, taped up sound. And I also remember a product called Dead Ringers, which was actually like a foam ring that had adhesive on one side that was slightly smaller than the diameter of the head that it was supposed to adhere to. And you stick it on the bottom of your head and it completely killed all the tone. I wonder if something like that might be a viable product once again. It does seem everything sort of comes full circle at some point. But dead drum sounds is not something that I have done a whole lot. Like I say, I came of age kind of in the 80s with people starting to take the carpet off the walls of the recording studios and starting to open up and not be in the booth, but bring the drums out into the live room and set up room mics. And then, of course, digital reverb, you know, and gated reverb, right? But I really, got familiar with drums being ambient and having an ambient sound, so dead drum sounds is not something I really ever did a whole lot of. And as a recording engineer and producer for 25, 30 years, I never really spent a lot of time with it. But I do have one buddy who loves dead drum sounds, and he has always kind of wanted me to do dead sounds, particularly for the snare drum, but also for the toms. And in fact, he wound up making a library, we wound up making a library, or I guess actually a virtual instrument called Soft Drums, which actually used tea towels. Now, he bought tea towels, and again, I didn't know what tea towels were. They're actually not tea towels, at least not here in the States. They're referred to, what are they referred to as? I have a pack of them. Flour sack towels. So I guess flour sack being the material that they're made of is something that historically flour was kept in. I got these at Walmart, a 5-pack for like $4.50 or something like that. So they're not expensive and they're rather big. Now I think these are actually rather large. What are these, 28 by 29 inches? So they're almost square, and they certainly will lay entirely across a drum. So my interest in this from making a video really kind of stems from working on the instrument with John Mayer, and I'll link to that instrument below if you want to see that. It's a really cool idea that he had for creating a very soft drum sound, and he specifically didn't want sticks. That instrument is played with like broomsticks and things that have more texture and less impact. And so it's a cool instrument, but I spent some time really kind of muting and tuning the drums and using tea towels to mute the drums and really kind of control the tone of them. So I got really interested in that and started kind of messing around with it on my own. And it turns out, as with most things, that there is sort of a way to do it, and you can get some variations with it. So I thought I would do a video and just kind of show some variations. Now, this particular setup, this is what I used for what you just heard at the intro, and that is a very, very dead snare sound and a fairly dead tom sound. Both of the toms are fairly dead, tuned low, and they're just kind of thumpy sound, and they're not really meant to resonate and sound like big toms as much as they are just to kind of sound bulky and thuddy in an interesting and intimate way. There's not really much ambience in the mix, but I thought I would show kind of the variation and why I did this. Now, if you look at this, and maybe with this camera you can kind of see a little bit better, this is really about 1.5 to 2 inches in from the edge. And obviously the whole thing is just folded in half, and it's just hanging over the tom. And that sound, is like this. So it's pretty dead, but it's not as dead as it could be. Like if you were just to do the Ringo thing and just drape the towel over the drum, that would be like this, which sounds kind of weird, partially because the bottom head is not muffled at all. Now, maybe if I put some tape on the bottom head or did something like that, this might be an interesting sound. but it's so short, so abrupt, and so dead. It's not unusable, but man, you really want to have that sound. I still want to have a little bit of resonance, a little bit of something that says, this is a tom, not a box, a tom. So I experimented with, folding it over and going partially. Still pretty dead. And the sound that I enjoyed was really out here. Still has some resonance. And by the way, the drum head is an Aquarian texture-coated head, single-ply coated head on the top of both of these toms and on the snare drum as well. Classic clear snare side on the bottom and the classic clear on the bottoms of the toms. So I took that same approach with the floor tom. Again, you're getting some resonance from the tom. This china's making noise. Let me... Ride cymbal's making noise too. And again, if I were to cover the tom with it, it's a different sound. Again, not a bad sound. But just because you're using a tea towel doesn't mean that you got to cover and kill the entire thing. You can actually just... That's almost a little too much resonance. So you can kind of tailor the amount by how much is hanging over. Now the snare drum, that one I did want pretty dead. And so what I did, I'll just show you real quick. I'll undo it and do it again. So by the way, just so you have an idea of what the tuning of this thing is like, it's pretty low. And so I did my snare drum tuning trick. By the way, this isn't really a tuning video necessarily, but if you do want to know how I tune my snare drums, I did do a video, and I'll link to that below as well. I did a video several months ago that talked about my overall tuning technique, regardless of whether it's high, medium, or low pitched. Doesn't really matter. It's the same approach. And then there's a variation that I do. And this is the variation, which is the two key rods closest to me are detuned. And that does throw when there's no muffling on the drum. Does make it sound kind of funky, weird. And if I was going to use it without muffling, I would make some additional adjustments to that. But I know that I'm going to muffle it. And the way I'm going to muffle it is, well, here, let me, first of all, I could just show you with this tea towel here. Could do the Ringo Starr method, the way I have seen in photographs, where you just cover the whole thing. Again, extremely dead. So that would be... which is not a bad sound, necessarily. But I folded this one over in a triangle, roughly half triangle. And I put it out past the center. And the reason I did that is because then I'm going to fold this side in, and I'm going to have the tape actually overlap this seam right here and get on the head. And so just kind of create the fold. So I've got a lot of the tea towel or flour sack towel touching the head, so it's very, very dead. But the reason I did it this way, kind of going around the outside rather than just laying it across the top, is because now I have access to the actual drum head. Sticks are hitting the head, which is a harder sound than that. There's just a little more attack by having the head exposed, so the stick is hitting the mylar. Okay. Ooh, okay. I don't have my headphones on, and I am very used to having headphones on. Drums are loud. Do you know that? Drums are loud. Actually, okay, so that's the approach that I did for this kit. And by the way, I didn't use a T-towel on the bass drum. I just muffled the bass drum and actually did it very similar to the way I actually did a video on 22-inch muffling or tuning. And this is pretty close to that, but instead of using a condenser mic in front, I'm actually using a Yamaha NS10 speaker. But I'm not using the whole speaker, I'm just using the woofer out of the Yamaha NS10. So basically a speaker cone that I stuck in a little project box that I got from like Hobby Lobby or something. I painted it black, as you do, and wired up an XLR to it or whatever. So it's sort of a homemade sub kick that I'm using in front. But that's kind of just sort of a quick primer, I guess you could say, on using T-towels. You can fold them over entirely over the drum and really shorten the sound dramatically, and get a different kind of attack from having the stick hit cloth instead of having the stick hit mylar. I like it hitting mylar. I like to feel the attack. Part of the coolness of having short staccato sounds is having that immediate sort of in-your-face attack, and having the head exposed to the stick by having the T-towel around it really kind of preserves that. So I know there are a lot of people out there who use T-towels and they just kind of throw them over the drums. So this is sort of my way of just saying T-towels are cool. You can definitely do that, but there are other options as well. And since I'm sort of going kicking and screaming into the dead drum sound, if you will, coming from the 80s and the 90s of having, and the 2000s, of having really lively sounds, and room mics are very important to me and all of that. And this is not that type of sound at all. It's something, again, something that I've not done a lot of in all of my years. So this is kind of fun and novel for me, which is why I thought I would do the video, kind of explaining what I have sort of discovered in the short run. And there's probably a lot of you out there going, yeah, Joel, welcome. You know, we've known all this, but maybe you're like me, you're an old dog, and this is kind of actually sort of a new thing. Or maybe you love the dead sound, but you're always kind of struggling between too dead and too live or whatever. And even though you have a massive wad of cloth, you actually do have the ability to kind of tailor it a little bit by how you place it on the drum. So just some ideas. I hope that that's useful and interesting. I appreciate you watching this. I'll be back soon with more stuff, and I hope to see you then. Thanks.